If you do manage to stop flights to Rwanda, does that mean that the UK won't need to leave the ECHR?
So I'm confident that we're acting in a way that's completely compliant with all our international obligations.
Seriously? A damning parliamentary report from the cross-party Joint Committee on Human Rights has found the government's Rwanda bill is fundamentally incompatible with the UK's human rights obligations, erodes the protections laid down in the Human Rights Act, contravenes parts of the European Convention on Human Rights, and falls short of the UK's commitment to comply with international treaties. And if all that's not bad enough, the report found the actions the Prime Minister is taking actually places the UK's hard-won reputation for the rule of law and human rights in jeopardy. So when the Prime Minister says this,
I'm confident that we're acting in a way that's completely compliant with all our international obligations.
he's talking complete bollocks. And what's worse, he knows it. What the government is doing here is actually giving itself the power to declare that the objective truth of facts decided by our courts can just be overruled. Just think about that. The objective truth of facts decided by our courts can just be overruled. Parliamentary sovereignty does not give this government the power to determine that a barefaced lie is the truth, which is what this bill does.
Yes, it's novel. I get that. Yes, it's radical.
What it is incomprehensible. And if we allow that to happen, it's a big step towards a dictatorship. Why are UK news shows not pointing this out to viewers?
So I think everyone can be pretty clear about my intentions.
The Rwanda bill not only strips away basic human rights from people seeking safety in this country, it actually puts all our rights at risk. Because if this government can just snatch them away from any section of society when it pleases, then none of us has rights. Just privileges that can be taken away by people in power whenever they want.
Look, if it ever comes to a choice between our national security, securing our borders, and membership of a foreign court, I'm of course always going to prioritise our national security. That's the right thing for the British Prime Minister to do.
Well, let's deal with this point first. The European Court of Human Rights is not, as the Prime Minister calls it,
a foreign court.
The European Court of Human Rights is an international court which we signed up to. Yet the Prime Minister was allowed to repeat this bollocks again unchallenged.
And I'm not going to let a foreign court, given all of that, block us.
It's an appalling and deliberately inflammatory and divisive choice of language from the Prime Minister. And let's be clear on this. This morning, the Prime Minister actually refused to rule out the UK joining Russia and Belarus as the only European countries outside the Human Rights Convention. Just think about that. Where is the outrage? And why are the implications of the UK leaving the ECHR not being pointed out to viewers? How about reminding them and the Prime Minister that the European Convention on Human Rights protects our right to a fair trial, freedom of assembly and expression, the right to participate in free elections, freedom of religion, freedom from discrimination, the right to privacy, freedom from torture and degrading treatment. And when the Prime Minister inevitably responds with his, well, we can just leave the ECHR and create our own Bill of Rights bollocks, point out to him that trusting his government with our human rights would be like handing a kitten over to a hungry crocodile.
What I'd say is, I think people can have some confidence about my commitment to deliver this because of our record to date.
Well, let's do that. According to International Human Rights Watch, the UK could soon make the list of countries that abuse rather than protects human rights thanks to this government's outright onslaught on the rights of its own citizens. Just think about that. During the past 18 months, Sunak's government has robbed millions of workers of the right to strike, locked millions of people out of the electoral process, a blatant act of voter suppression by the government, and stripped back our right to protest about it all. Why don't news shows point that out?
The bill contains a very specific power that makes it clear that it's for ministers to decide whether to comply with temporary Rule 39 orders. Now, we wouldn't have put that power in there unless I was prepared to use it.
Well, that's the UK Prime Minister proudly announcing he's willing to break international law by ignoring Rule 39 orders, which are issued by the European Court of Human Rights on an exceptional basis where there is a real risk of serious and irreversible harm. And even worse, the government's own legal advice states that failing to comply with Section 39 orders would be a breach of international law.
Now, I know there are some who will hear all of this and accuse me of lacking compassion.
Well, no arguments from me on that one.
To deal with any legal cases quickly and decisively, the judiciary have made available 25 courtrooms and identified 150 judges who could provide over 5,000 sitting days.
Seriously? The criminal justice system in the UK is in crisis, with cases taking years to come to trial. And the government suddenly finds from nowhere 25 courtrooms, 150 judges and 5,000 sitting days? So it's patently clear that with will on the part of the government, the catastrophe in our criminal justice system could have been fixed years ago.